Hello, everyone, and on behalf of the Salt Lake Chamber, welcome to our Gubernatorial Candidate Forum. This is part of our series of candidate forums covering all the major races taking place this election year across Utah. We invite you to join us for each of these forums. More information can be found on the Salt Lake Chamber website at slchamber.com. I'm Derek Miller, the President and CEO of the Chamber, and I'm joined by my co-host and chair of the Chamber Board this year, Nate Callister. He's the Executive Vice President, the head of Utah and Idaho Commercial Banking at Wells Fargo. We're streaming live today from the Chamber offices. We'll also be recording this and making it available to all of our members.
Thanks, Derek. This forum will focus on issues important to the business community. We're meeting each candidate and allowing them approximately 30 minutes to respond to the questions. The number of questions each candidate is able to answer will depend on the length of their answers. So without further ado, let's jump in and let me introduce our first candidate. Please welcome Representative Brian King, a Democratic candidate for governor. Representative King, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Nate. Good to be with you, Derek.
We want to give you all the time that is necessary for you to share your thoughts with the members of the Chamber, and so we'll get right to the questions. The first one, Representative King, is on economic growth. As you know, and as you've experienced, Utah is among the fastest growing states in the nation. What concrete steps would you take as governor to ensure that this growth translates into sustainable economic benefits for all Utahns? And how would you address concerns that the rapid expansion that we are experiencing could potentially outpace infrastructure and workplace readiness?
Thanks for being with you today, Derek and Nate, and the Chamber, of course. I want to answer that, but I first want to give you just a little background on who I am and why I'm running. I am a native Utahn. I grew up in Salt Lake County and have lived here my whole life. I'm a lawyer. I represent folks who've had denied life and health and disability claims. I do it on a contingent fee. I started my own law firm about 20 plus years ago, and I understand what it means to be an entrepreneur. I don't get paid unless there's a good recovery in a case, and it really feels good to hold these largest corporations in the country accountable. I've been watching what has been happening up at the legislature for many years. I've served there myself for 16 years. 8 of those 16 years, I was the House Minority Leader, the Democratic leader for the House of Representatives. And I've always appreciated the opportunity to engage in a market economy as a lawyer, and appreciated the competition that allows me to prove my skills and make my arguments for my clients and present my cases to the court. And I appreciate the same thing when we're talking about politics and public policy here in the state of Utah. I've watched with this growth that we've achieved, remarkable growth in many respects in Utah over the last 2 or 3 decades. And of course, it's been a wonderful thing, but it's brought challenges with it too. One of the things I think, to answer your question, Derek, is we sometimes, I feel, sell ourselves too cheaply as Utahns. And what I mean by that is we've got a lot of folks and a lot of businesses who want to come to Utah. And that's a good thing. But it means that we can be somewhat picky about who we want to bring to our state, what kinds of jobs and industries we want, what kind of salary range they are going to pay and bring to our state. And if you want to have economic development and growth that is productive and that results in real benefits for working Utahns, middle-class Utahns, I think one of the things that we could do a better job of, quite honestly, is when we talk about incentives for these companies to come to Utah, when we sell ourselves as a state, we need to make sure that we say not just, here's some economic incentives for you to come to Utah, but we need to get commitments from those companies, those corporations, that they will come and that they will pay a good living wage for our employees. I'm not particularly interested in bringing new business to Utah when it pays $13, $15, $17 an hour. What we want is a starting wage for workers that is more in the nature of $25 an hour or even higher, and saying to them, there needs to be good economic opportunities for our citizens to not just have a decent wage to begin with, but to grow in the company and in the business, have opportunities to satisfy their own ambitions and desires for what kind of work they want to do and how much they can make, whether it's with the same company or be trained to use that as a springboard for something else that is even more worthwhile from their perspective. So you ask about economic growth and making sure that it's viable. I think that we need to do a better job of making sure that the jobs and the economy, the economic conditions that we provide for Utahns are high quality, because we're in the catbird seat in terms of selling ourselves to the rest of our country and the world. You want to come to Utah? Great. It's a wonderful place to be. We can afford to be picky about who we bring, though. It ought to be clean industry. It ought to be high tech. It ought to be industry and businesses that pays well. So that's an answer to part of your question. I can't remember the second half of it, Derek. Yes. Well, there's certainly challenges that come with making sure that we have both physical and non-physical infrastructure. The physical infrastructure, of course, is challenging because we've got one of the things that brings people to Utah is our natural resources. And the more people you have coming to the state, the more pressure you put on our natural resources. So there have to be some creative ways of approaching that. We have to make sure that when we bring people to Utah, that we don't overwhelm our natural resources in a way that either degrades them to a point that they're not as spectacular as they are right now, or that they just become lower in value to people in terms of selling our state to the rest of the country and the world. But there's also infrastructure, of course, in terms of physical infrastructure, our transportation system, our educational system, making sure that we have the water and that we use and conserve the water effectively. We've got to do a better job, quite honestly, of making sure the Great Salt Lake is healthy. That's part of the infrastructure that is necessary to maintain our state. It's not the infrastructure that oftentimes people think of, but it's critically important. And we can do that. We've got a great forward-looking perspective on our Department of Transportation has really been stellar in terms of departments across the country in talking about and thinking about light rail, and we've got tracks and front runner. We've got transit-oriented development so that we can ensure that we do a better job of building communities that don't require a 30 or 45-minute commute to work. Technology is making that easier too, of course. We see more virtual workplaces. All those are positive things. And we've got a lot that's good to build on in this state, and I would want to make sure that as governor, we would continue to build on that. And the best way of ensuring that we build on it productively is to bring greater competition to the political and policy discussions that we have here in the state of Utah. Because right now, we have a monopoly on state power. And that monopoly has lived and been in place for decades. And monopolies with regard to policies and politics are no better than monopolies with regard to economies and markets. The consumer, in this case, the citizens of the state of Utah, suffer when we have a political or policy monopoly. And we can do better at bringing more ideas to the table and having competition between those differing ideas so that the best of all ideas fall out for the benefit of Utahns.
Thank you.
You mentioned a minute ago just the high-tech sector. So this next question is really around workforce development, maybe specifically around Utah's growing tech sector, which is obviously booming, but experiencing what we'd call a significant skills gap. What immediate actions would you take to ensure our education and training systems produce a workforce ready for those types of high-demand jobs?
I think you have to look at the future and make sure that you're planning based on what a second grader and a fifth grader and an eighth grader and a senior in high school are going to need in terms of being prepared for the future. Sometimes, especially in our economy and in our political framework where profit becomes so critically important and talked about, we get a little short-sighted. And we aren't willing to invest in the future like we should. I think we've done that too much in the past couple of decades in Utah, that we have not been investing in public and higher education in the way that is as far-sighted as looking down the road a couple of decades as we need to and we ought to. So we've done some good things. I mean, I look at some of the things I'm familiar with, a lot of programs at Salt Lake Community College, for example, and some of our other institutions of higher learning have put in place to ensure that we have technical and professional specialties and programs that look down the road for what the market is going to call for and require of our students, and ensure that there are specialties, programs put in place to address those needs. We can do more of that because, as you say, Nate, we do have a gap there in terms of what the market is asking for in terms of our children's expertise, whether they have just graduated from high school, whether they are getting an associate's degree from a place like Salt Lake Community College or one of our other institutions of higher learning, or whether they're going on to get a bachelor's or even an advanced degree. We need to make sure that our secondary education programs, our 7th through 12th grade education, and our higher education programs are aware of and geared toward providing good opportunities in a developing, fast-moving workplace. And that's something that we can do. It's something that actually Utah's been pretty good at. I think we can do better. And to the degree that we do better, we're going to narrow that gap that you've referred to, Nate.
Let's talk for a minute about regulations. This is important for businesses because on one hand, businesses want level playing fields. They want consumer protection. They want environmental protection. But at the same time, it has to exist in balance because one of the reasons that Utah is so considered a business-friendly place is that we strive to find the right balance between regulation that accomplishes those things and sometimes regulation that goes too far. Share your thoughts with us on this topic, and if there's any specific examples of regulation that you as governor would be interested in taking a look at and seeing if they need to be reformed in a way that would foster a more competitive business environment.
It's a great question, Derek. Thank you for it. A word that you used in the question that I think is really important is the word balance, because there are ways in which we want and need regulation. I know that there are some that are almost always on the side of less regulation is better. Sometimes that's true that less regulation would be better, but there are many times when more regulation is necessary to provide the kind of consumer protection, environmental protection that you refer to. And the key, of course, is striking the right balance. Again, when you've got no competition at the level of the legislature or the governor's office with regard to different ideological and even partisan perspectives, it makes it more likely that extreme voices are the individuals and the voices that carry the day. And that's a problem for us in Utah because we've seen more and more fringe and extreme voices imposing sort of purity or litmus tests from partisan perspective weigh in here in a way that I don't think is helpful for Utah. And so I think the very fact, to answer your question, that we would have balance brought to state government by having someone in the governor's office who is of a different political party than the supermajority legislature is going to go a long way toward bringing different perspectives and balance to the table. That will allow us to make sure that we have the proper mix of regulation and market principles, competition. So you ask about some specific examples. One of the things that's interesting that we've done, Margaret Bussey, who is the director of the Department of Commerce here in Utah, has testified before the Business and Labor Committee, which I'm on, up at the legislature, and has come in and said, she asked us the question, it was a great question. She said, do you know what the most common occupation is for our graduates who get a bachelor's degree in psychology? And we, of course, didn't know. And she said, retail. Now, that's a problem because these are individuals who, they don't want to be selling. I mean, maybe some of them do want to sell things, but, you know, they've got a degree in psychology, or maybe it's sociology. It's something to do with other human beings in a way that calls for more skills and expertise than just selling things. And so we've made some progress within the Department of Commerce in identifying areas to provide licensure for these individuals who can then work, whereas right now they can't work. There's no licensure for them. They have to go on and get a degree in a master's in social work or a master's in psychology or a PhD, something like that. before they can actually work in an area of, say, mental health and substance use disorder treatment. But if you can provide licensure for individuals who have a bachelor's degree in psychology, they don't need to spend the time and money to go get an advanced degree. They can go immediately into some field that they're trained and licensed to do. That helps them, and it helps all of us as Utahns. It provides more professionals who can work in an area where we badly need those individuals. So that can be replicated in many other areas, I believe. And I think one of the things that we want to do is task our state agencies to look at areas where we can provide for guardrails to protect public health, guardrails to make sure that there is not unfair competition. And yet at the same time, we provide greater opportunities for vocation for individuals who right now don't have licensure to do a work that they'd be very happy to do and that they're well qualified to do. So licensure is an area where we can provide many great opportunities beyond where we are right now.
Follow-up question around infrastructure investment. You mentioned that obviously a little bit at the beginning. We were talking about the economic growth in this state and the importance of that. With our growing population, with the Olympics slated to be here in 2034, are there any other specific infrastructure investments that you would like to prioritize? And then kind of a second part of that, as you think about the rural areas in Utah, any priorities there to help make sure they keep up with our growth across the state?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Good question. Yeah, thanks, Nate. Good questions. I think that one of the real blessings that we've seen from Utah in the past is we brought the 2002 Olympics here. And as part of that, both before and after the Olympics, we had a lot of federal money available to provide the kind of growth in infrastructure, particularly with regard to transportation and the Olympic venue sites, that have served us enormously well. There's more that we can do in those areas, transportation, particularly to ensure that we have the capacity to not just host a great Olympics in 2034, but that we have the capacity to build for and accommodate the growth that we're going to see here and maintain high quality of life. Everyone wants high quality of life. And the kind of investments that we're talking about in transportation infrastructure are important, but investments in having high quality education, public education, higher education are all critically important. And the Olympics gives us an opportunity, as we did in 2002, to go to the federal government and say, look, we want to have the United States of America shine. We want to do that for the world in 2034. A lot of preparation has to go into that. We need your help. We need your help not just because it's the United States, but because this is going to reflect well on our entire country. Is it going to benefit Utah? Of course. But we want to do it with the idea in mind of holding ourselves out and our pride of nation. So I think that that's an opportunity to do that. I think, again, we can get back into rethinking how we provide our communities and quality of life in communities. Right now, we do far too much commuting. We spend way too much time on the road. It's not good for our air quality. It's not good in terms of time that we spend well. It's time away from family. Technology is going to mitigate that a little bit and allow us to spend more time in our homes and in businesses and offices that are close to our homes. But we can and should develop transit in a way that allows for better public transportation in a way that doesn't require that we get in our car and drive 30 or 45 minutes every day in one direction or another. You asked about rural Utah. I'm glad you did. One of the things that we've really done recently that has helped is this administration the last 4 years has put broadband in place to an expanded basis across the entire state and across the entire country. That's enormously helpful in improving the quality of life and making it more likely that rural Utahns can carry out a job remotely from their home, whereas 10, 15 years ago, they couldn't have done that so easily without broadband. And the same is true with the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a couple of years ago, that put in place economic incentives to allow us to transition as a state and as a country more quickly and easily from old source energy sources such as coal, natural gas, and oil into something that Utah has an abundance of. We have enormous potential and resources in terms of renewable energy, whether it's solar or geothermal or wind or hydro. These are all things that we can move forward with greater speed and energy and excitement about. And this is a way of ensuring that our rural Utah communities transition more painlessly, especially in those areas out in the basin, Emery County, Carbon County. Those are areas that have been well served for decades by extractive industry. But we all know that we're coming to the end of the life of that kind of industry, and we need to help those communities transition more painlessly to areas that can be used, such as solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, that kind of thing.
We want to turn our attention to a topic that I'm sure you've heard a lot about as you've been on the campaign trail, and that's affordable housing. This lack of affordable housing that we have is causing a crisis, a growing crisis in our state. As governor, what would be your plan to address this issue, and how would you ensure that housing development will keep up with our economic development and our population growth?
You asked, you said, I'm sure you've heard a lot about this. I certainly have, Derek. It's a great question, and it's a pressing question. We all want, the last thing we as Utahns have, I have children here, I have grandchildren here. The last thing I want is for them to be coming to me and saying, I can't afford to live here anymore. I want to stay close to you and, my mother, but the reality is I can't do it. I got to leave. Nobody wants that. And so we've got to address this. And we have taken some steps. I'm not up here to say everything is doom and gloom with the past administration, the current administration or legislature, because there have been some good things that have happened in the sense that we put in place a program that provides assistance, financial assistance to those who are getting into starter homes. I think that's a good thing, and I think we ought to expand it. We still have money available from the initial establishment of that program. So maybe we need to make sure that individuals who are looking for starter homes are aware that the program exists in the first place. But one of the other things that we need to do, and again, this is talking about competing ideas and bringing balance to state government in terms of perspectives. A significant driver of our housing costs in this state are out-of-state investors, hedge funds, venture capitalists, other wealthy individuals or entities coming into Utah, looking at our land as a really desirable resource for investment or speculation purposes, buying those properties and driving up the costs. There are things that we can and should do to ensure that the housing stock here in the state of Utah is kept and that there are incentives put in place to ensure that we end up with a housing stock for Utahns as opposed to being for out-of-state speculators. And you can do that by putting in some financial disincentives for out-of-state individuals or entities that have no intention of living here. It's one thing to want to buy a property and want to move to Utah because you want to live here yourself. I don't have a problem with that. But what I do have a problem with is the cost of housing being driven up artificially by individuals out of state who just say, well, I just want to buy some property because I want to make a killing and flip it over time. We don't need that. That's going to hurt Utahns. It's going to hurt our children and grandchildren's ability to stay here. So that's one thing that I don't hear a lot being talked about, but I think a different perspective being brought to the table, some competition in the ideas would be helpful. And finally, I would say in answer to that question, I think that we can do more to empower local governments, cities, towns, counties, municipalities, to come up with creative solutions for how they deal with this issue. More flexibility in terms of density, allowing for density in their areas, or alternate dwelling units, or zoning, and that just saying to them, we will give you the latitude at the state level to come up with zoning solutions that are going to be helpful in ensuring that we reduce the cost of housing. That's something that we can do a better job of.
So rising healthcare costs are a significant burden, not only on the businesses here in Utah, but obviously on the employees. What specific reforms will you pursue to make healthcare more affordable to us?
It's an excellent question. One of the things, there are two things that come to mind, because when you talk about employers and businesses, I'm a small businessman. I love it. I'm the sole owner of my business. I started out with two people in 2003, myself and this incredible paralegal, Linda Boson, and we have expanded now to about 15 people. And I provide health care to my employees, and it's wonderful. and they appreciate that. But I know small business owners who really struggle with this, and they can't do it. They don't feel like they can get their business, a startup company, off the ground and provide the kind of costs that are associated with healthcare. Here's one thing that we could do. The federal level, we do have incentives, tax breaks, and incentives to employers to provide health care. We could do something in the same line with state incentives for saying to our employers, especially small businesses here in Utah, if you qualify for some state incentives to provide health care for your employees and their dependents, and you're small and you're struggling, we're going to help you with that. And I would not want to give that money away without ensuring that the businesses qualified in terms of had a need for that. But businesses that do have a need for it, I think there's room for us to help those businesses from a state level in terms of providing some tax breaks or economic incentives to assist with that. And then the second thing, Nate, is it's different in terms of providing affordable health care, but Utah is last in this country in terms of signing up Medicaid-eligible children for Medicaid. These are individuals who have the greatest need for health care, and we're last, 50th in the country, according to recent reports, in terms of not getting Medicaid-eligible children signed up for the program and having access to health care through Medicaid. That's an easy fix. If I were the governor, I would direct the Department of Health to identify why that's true and come up with solutions. Maybe it's cutting red tape. Maybe it's making applications simpler. Maybe it's getting information out to families in the lower economic end of the income scale that, hey, you do have Medicaid available for your children so that they know. But we've got to address that. There's absolutely no reason that the poorest children, the children in greatest need in our state, don't have access to health care through Medicaid.
Representative King, we have about 3 minutes left. We want to give you an opportunity to share anything that you would like to, that we haven't already discussed, with the business community.
I am a believer in competition. I love it. It's invigorating in my own life and in my law practice. We need greater competition among policy and politics here in the state of Utah. We've done a lot of things well in the past, but the motto of our campaign is for the better. It's not enough to just disagree better. We have to recognize that disagreeing leads to better outcomes. We have to disagree civilly and respectfully. But once we have the clash of two good ideas, instead of just taking one side of the political spectrum's ideas and putting them on the table, if we can have the clash of two good ideas, that's when Utah is really benefiting. And so disagreeing for the better is the motto of the campaign for good reason.
Thank you, Representative King. Thank you for spending some of your time with us, sharing your thoughts with the chamber members. We wish you the best of luck. And we also say to those who have joined us this afternoon to please stay tuned as we bring in our next candidate.
Now, please welcome Governor Spencer J. Cox, the incumbent candidate running for re-election. Governor Cox, could you please begin by telling our viewers a little bit about yourself and your vision for Utah's future?
Sure. Thank you to the chamber. Thank you, Nate, Derek. Thank you for hosting us today. It's an honor to be with you again. It's been an incredible opportunity to serve as governor of this great state over the past 4 years. And I'm so proud of what we've been able to accomplish as a state, working together with our local officials, with the legislature, with our county commissioners, and especially with the people of this great state. We've been named the best state in the nation in so many categories, and the best state overall for lots of different reasons. But one of them is our ability to collaborate and work closely together. And that's something I'm proud of with my administration. My vision for the state is the same as it was 4 years ago. It's a vision based on prosperity, that there are a lot of false choices in politics these days, and Utah doesn't have to accept those false choices. We get to make our own destiny, and that's something that we've done better than any state in the nation coming out of COVID, working so closely together to solve the biggest problems facing our state, and we have some, and I'm sure we'll talk about those. But it is a vision of prosperity for everyone. We don't have to choose issues. We get to lift everyone in this state, making sure that we're cutting taxes as we have more, the largest tax cuts in our state's history, so that people can keep more of their hard-earned dollars. Making sure that our teachers are making more money than they've ever made before. The largest teacher raises in our state's history, putting us in the top 10 for starting teacher pay. Those are the types of choices that we're making to make our state better, and I can't wait to see what we accomplish together over the next 4 years.
Governor Cox, let's talk for a minute about economic growth. As you know, Utah has had one of the fastest growing economies for several years. Can you tell us about what you've done as governor to ensure that we're not just growing, but that growth is actually translating into for the benefit of all Utahns? And if reelected, how you'll continue to address concerns that maybe we're growing too fast?
Yeah. Look, there are different options when you're trying to move a state forward, and there isn't a state in this nation that wouldn't give anything to have the type of economic growth that we've had. And Derek, you've been involved in that growth for many years. Back when you were running the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and then as Chief of Staff for Governor Herbert. And what we learned then, and what we've continued to understand, is that a good economy will solve lots of other problems. And so this has always been our focus, making sure that economically we're viable. That's the role of the chamber as well. And so we've put into place, I believe, some changes that are important when it comes to growth overall and healthier growth, so that we can manage that. One of the things we used to do was try to incentivize any business that wanted to come here to grow the economy. We don't have to do that anymore. We get to be much more selective about what we do, because those companies are coming here anyway, and the businesses that are here are expanding. And so we should help our local businesses do what they need to do to expand their footprint. We want to make sure that we have the best jobs available for the people that live here. Now, having that success, being the #1 economy in the country over the past 4 years and really over the past decade, is a blessing, but it attracts other people, right? It just goes without saying. I've said before, I've said it many times. I said it in the debate last week. I'd love to build a wall around Utah, make California pay for it. That's not how it works in the United States. We don't get those opportunities. And so the key is, growth is not good or bad. Growth is neutral. The question is, are we investing in the right ways so that the growth can continue, but also maintain a high quality of life? And that's where our focus is right now. And again, we'll probably touch on some of these things as we move forward. But we have to make sure that people can afford to live here. So giving tax dollars back is one way to do that. That's one way to make sure that they have more money in their pockets. We also have to make sure that we can own homes here, that our kids and grandkids can own homes here. And that's been our #1 priority this year, my #1 priority heading into this year's legislative session. We passed several bills focused on building 35,000 starter homes over the next 4 years. And that's where our focus is going to continue. The second piece of that, though, is energy. Making sure that we have affordable energy. We're not producing enough energy in our state right now. We're not producing enough energy in this country right now for the needs that are ours. And so we have a very robust goal that I announced just a couple days ago to double the amount of energy production in our state over the next 10 years. Again, making sure that our people have low energy costs. And then the third one is transportation. As people move here and as our kids and grandkids stay here, we're seeing our freeways starting to get a little more impacted when it comes to commuter times. And we have an opportunity with the Olympics coming in 10 years to reimagine and reinvest in transit. So making sure that our freeways are the right size, doing more in mass transit as well. We're doing some really interesting things in air mobility. This is, I said, it's not exactly the Jetsons, but we're headed that direction. And eventually we will be moving people via air taxis above the roadways, which will help alleviate some of that congestion. The last thing I want to mention on this is something I'm very proud of. We are the first state in the nation. We have a very ambitious goal to connect every city and town in Utah via trail, so that people can move about in other ways. So you can bike, you can run, you can push a stroller, you can get around this state in different ways. People love this vision. We have $100 million that we've dedicated to this, and the program's moving forward. Stay tuned. We've got some announcements coming in the next week.
Governor, next question is around workforce development. As you know, we have a booming tech sector here, but there also is a skills gap that creates some challenges for us. What measures have you implemented and what further steps will you take to ensure that our education and training systems are preparing a workforce ready for these types of high demand jobs?
This is something that is deeply concerning. Several months ago, we had the lowest unemployment in the nation, our lowest unemployment in our state's history. And I thought it would be amazing to be the governor when you have the lowest unemployment in your state's history. Turns out it wasn't as amazing as I thought it would be, because we have these incredible businesses that are expanding and they need the workforce. And so this is where so much of our focus is going now. We have something called Talent Ready Utah, something that we've worked on for several years. And we've been expanding Talent Ready Utah over the last couple years in big ways. Talent Ready Utah is our education system working very closely with employers in the state to make sure that our young people have the certificates and degrees that they need to take those jobs of now and the jobs of the future. And that's starting earlier. We used to say, work is the thing you do for education is the thing you do for the first 20 plus years of your life, and then work is what you do after that. That paradigm has to change. And so we're starting earlier with work in high school so that our high school students can start to get a taste of that. Talent Ready Utah is helping them so that many of them are graduating with certificates to go right into the workforce if they want to, but also then they can build on that with our higher education institutions, our UCAT institution, our career and technical institutions. So that's a big piece of what we're doing. The second one is that we've made a mistake as a country and as a state over the past 40 years. This idea that every kid needs a bachelor's degree is a mistake. It's not good for our kids. It's not good for our economy. Many of them have other passions, and we have the best universities in the country, and we continue to need more of our young people in those universities. But our career and technical education schools are some of the best anywhere in the world, and we've been investing in them more so in the past 4 years than ever before, building them up, making sure they have the equipment they need, and then tying them directly to our employers, making sure that they have the latest training so that we can get people right into the workforce. The last thing I want to share is something that we're working on right now. I just brought on Rich Nye, a former superintendent of Granite School Districts. He's come on as my education advisor just over the last few weeks. And we've been sitting down. We actually had a conversation with legislative leadership. This idea that we want every student in Utah, when they graduate from high school, to have a credential, to have their first credential, something that will work at a university, at a career and technical college, something that they can build on when they're done. That will help everybody. It's cheaper, by the way, to get those credentials in high school than it is afterwards, but also giving them a leg up to understand they've already started towards whatever that next path is, that post-secondary path is, and then make all of that stackable. So you graduate with a credential, you go to a career and technical education college, you get a certificate, you go into the workforce, they pay for you to go to the university, and you just keep adding on to that. That's the continuum that we're looking at so that we can make sure that we have something for everyone, and that our employers in the state have the people that they need to grow their businesses.
Let's talk for a minute about regulation. This is an important topic for businesses because on one hand, they recognize that it's needed in order to level playing fields, to protect their customers, to protect the environment, good and important purposes. But on the other hand, they recognize that nothing could hurt a business more than overburdensome and often unnecessary regulation. What are your thoughts about how we strike the right balance so that we have a business-friendly environment, but at the same time, we're not compromising any of those protections?
So Derek, when I talked about kind of false choices, this is one of those false choices that too many states fall into, that you either have to deregulate or you have to protect the health and safety of people, and you have to choose between those two. We reject that mindset. We believe that we can protect the health and safety of the people of our state and also have the lightest touch regulation possible. And that's exactly what we've tried to do. When I became governor, that day I got sworn in, and a few minutes later I was signing my first executive order. That first executive order was an occupational licensing review, and it allowed us and my team to start reviewing all of the licensing regulatory licenses for every occupation in the state. Out of that has grown something that the rest of the country is jealous of and looking at right now. OPLR, which is the entity that does these reviews, we are working with different industries. Every year, we work together with the legislature to decide which industries we're going to tackle this year. Last year, we had a big focus on mental and behavioral health, and looking at the licensure structure and realizing we had some serious problems. We have thousands of kids graduating with bachelor's degrees every year in psychology, and they can't do anything with those bachelor's degrees. And so we're figuring out ways to get them more involved in the workforce. We also have a big need for more people in this space. So we're doing that with all kinds of different agencies in our state, entities in our state, working to look at how we can review those occupations and make sure that that our young people and adults have an opportunity to get into these careers. When you look at the most important occupations right now that are coming towards us, industries. AI is a great example of the way we look at regulation here. AI is a new and emerging field. It has tremendous upside and tremendous downside. On the one hand, you hear it's going to cure cancer and solve all of our biggest problems. And on the other side, you hear it could destroy the world any day now. And so how do you regulate something like this and in a way that doesn't stifle opportunity, and yet also protects our state? So we did something, again, unique, and I've been traveling around the country talking about it because people are so interested. But we have this AI policy lab, and what we've done is we brought together the best experts in this state, from higher education, from the industry itself, from government, and they sit down and they work together. And then we're talking to businesses who are interested in doing something new in our state around AI. And they bring their presentations in, and then we help them. We work closely with them to figure out what the downsides are, what the upsides are. We want to make it easy for them to transition so that they can do business, so that there's some certainty in what they're trying to do. And we're working on it together instead of us against them. It's all of us working together. We've done that with the regulatory sandbox. We have a regulatory sandbox. Any business in the state can come in and request a reprieve from a regulation, and that goes before a board. They talk about the reprieve and how they're going to protect the safety so that they can see if it's absolutely necessary. We have regulations on the books that are 50 years old in industries that have changed dramatically in the past 5 years, and maybe those regulations don't make sense anymore. This is a chance for them to get a reprieve and to prove that we don't need those regulations anymore.
Let's talk a little bit about infrastructure investment. You mentioned the return of the Olympics in 2034, which is super exciting. We know all the projections around growth here. You mentioned transportation. What other specific infrastructure projects have you prioritized? And then also, as you think about the rural areas of Utah, how will we ensure that they receive investment as well?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for bringing up the rural areas. I know sometimes, the Salt Lake Chamber, we're on the Wasatch Front. We talk a lot about the Wasatch Front and what's happening here. But I always like to remind people that the Salt Lake Chamber is a state chamber and works with the chambers all across the state, including in rural places like Sanpete County, where I'm from. Over the past 4 years, we have invested more in infrastructure as a state than any administration in history, any 4 years in history. In fact, 2 of those years, we had back-to-back record investments in infrastructure. So I'll hit a couple of those. Roads, always a big one. I think close to $5 billion in infrastructure around transportation. Water is huge, and we were going through the longest and biggest drought in our state's history. We've invested over $1 billion in water and water infrastructure and water conservation. Those are the types of investments that will set us up for generations to come, and I think are absolutely important. When it comes to rural areas, those investments go there as well. We changed the formula to help rural areas with their roads. As I was visiting, when I ran for office 4 years ago and was visiting all 248 cities and towns, I realized very quickly that there were some towns where the RV I was driving should not have been driving in because the roads were in such a bad shape. But there was no way they would ever have enough money to fix those roads or refinish those roads. And so we were able to make a change to make sure that rural Utah didn't get left out. So now as we look forward to the future, we have, I mentioned the housing crisis, right? And reducing the price of housing in our state. We have close to 200,000 permitted lots in this state. Far more than enough to lower the price of housing and make sure we have housing for everybody who wants it in the state. The problem is we don't have infrastructure to all of those places. And so those are areas where we're working very closely and strategically to help local communities, to help counties, to help developers, to help prospective homeowners, to make sure we're investing and getting that infrastructure in the right places where it needs to be, so that we can build and reduce the price of housing, and then continue to invest. We need to double track Front Runner, so that Front Runner is running every 15 minutes instead of every half hour. That will be a game changer for people and ridership on Front Runner. We want those trains to go faster. So that's another place that we're going to be investing in the future. And again, as we prepare for the Olympics, you're going to see much more of that. But rural Utah cannot and will not be left behind.
Let's talk a little bit more about housing affordability. I'm sure this is a topic that you hear a lot about as you've been on the campaign trail. I'm sure it's a topic that you've thought a lot about. Highlight for us some of the things that your administration did over the past 4 years, 3.5, almost 4 years, on this topic, and then where would you like to go if you're reelected?
Yeah. Thank you, Derek. So yes, I said it before, I'll say it again. This is my number one priority going into the last legislative session. And over the past 4 years, we've been tackling this in chunks, dozens of bills to impact density in the right places. Again, this is where we get so much of a false choice with kind of the NIMBYism. Everybody knows we need more housing, but they want it where they can't see it. And we can do this in smart ways. We can do this in ways that don't impact the quality of life. So no, we should not be building, tens of thousands of apartment buildings in places where we don't have road infrastructure, for example, where it's just going to clog things up and make it more difficult. We should be building thousands of units in places where we do have infrastructure around our transit hubs for Front Runner and light rail, for sure. Those are places where it should be built, and we've passed laws to make that happen. But of all the things we've worked on, the one I'm most proud of that is just going into effect now is this goal of building 35,000 starter homes over the next 4 years. I'm convinced that if we have an entire generation of people who don't own real property, that we will rue the day. It will be terrible for our economy, terrible for our kids and grandkids, terrible for our social networks, that just kids falling through the cracks, and wealth creation is so important. Home ownership is the American dream, and so this is our focus. And we've been working very closely with people that build homes and working with our local communities. And what we realized was it's really hard right now to get loans for projects to build starter homes. Nobody's building starter homes anymore. Homes that are 1,200 to 1,500 square feet, homes that are under $350,000. It just doesn't happen. And so we're working with banks and credit unions and short-term construction loans where 60% of the project has to be under $400,000. Again, this is new. We're the only ones in the country doing this. Every state's looking at it, and we're excited. We just got our first project approved in Weber County. 250 homes that are going in there. Most of those will be under $400,000. It's an exciting time. Lots of developers and potential homeowners have come to us with interest. I think you're going to see much bigger projects, thousands of homes over, again, 35,000 homes over the next 4 years is our goal moving forward. And that's really what I want to see. And as we, and it's more than just that. I want to be very clear. We need more townhomes. We need more condominiums as well. That's home ownership. That's equity building. We need apartment buildings in the right place. And those are by and large happening, but there's still room for some more of that. And when we start to see those prices coming down, that's when we'll know we're on the right track. And I know we're close.
Healthcare costs are a significant concern to businesses, their employees, to all of us. What actions have you taken as governor to address this, and what further reforms will you pursue?
So this is something that every state in the nation is struggling with, like housing. It's not just a Utah problem, it's an every state problem. It's a developed world problem for sure. We, 2 years ago, I launched something unique that had never been tried before. It's called the One Utah Health Collaborative. And what we did was we brought together experts in the field, in the healthcare field, and we brought everyone in the healthcare field together. That's what's unique. It hadn't happened before. So if you look at every portion of the chain of healthcare, we're meeting now regularly. And so employers are represented. Employers who pay for insurance for their employees. We have the pharmaceutical companies who are there, who are responsible for drug prices. We have insurance companies at the table who end up paying part of that, right? We have hospitals represented. We have the medical profession, doctors and nurses who are represented. Everybody is at the table, and they're trying to tackle this thing, the incredible price and increasing cost of providing healthcare in our state. And we have a few goals around that. The goals are, of course, reducing the price of healthcare, but also increasing the efficacy of healthcare. So we don't want to just decrease the price and then have health outcomes go down either. And then the third part of that is making sure that everyone has access. How do we do that? People in rural Utah, people in our minority communities, people who historically have struggled to have access. Can we do all three of those things? And so what we're doing is everybody is bringing their best ideas to the table. Then we're vetting those ideas and trying to find out the best practices. We have some companies who have figured out how to reduce healthcare costs in this state to their employees and do it in a way that their employees love it. They're getting good access, good outcomes. And so we're taking those ideas and sharing them across the board. We're doing the same with pharmaceutical companies. We're seeing where drug prices are cheaper in other places. How can we implement those practices here? Again, hospitals, doctors, nurses, all of the above working together. It's a 15-year program that we're working through. We know nobody's been able to solve this overnight, but we truly believe over the next 15 years we can do this, and that all of those little things add up to some big things. And my goal is over the next 4 years and over the next 15, this will outlast me. This will be my last 4 years of service. That we get those costs down so people can use their money on other things. You're welcome.
Governor Cox, we have about 3 minutes left. We want to give you the last word. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the chamber members and the business community about your candidacy and what you hope for the state?
Yeah, look, just thank you again. I want to thank the chamber members specifically. I get to work with chamber members every day in the state. One of the things I do every month is I take time to go and visit businesses all across the state, and it's kind of fun. Selfishly, it's like the TV show How Things Are Made. I get to go see how things are made and how things are done here, and it's fascinating to see that we are leading the country in so many ways. We are on the cutting edge of technological advances, seeing the innovation that is happening here to solve the biggest problems in the world, whether it's on the healthcare front. I mentioned curing cancer earlier, that there's a chance that will happen right here in the state of Utah. Building things. We're a nation that doesn't build like we once built before, but we have builders here. We have people who care about this place, and that's where I want to finish. More than anything else, it's not just that they're making new products or solving problems and creating jobs. They're doing all of that. They are, and that's so important. But the way they do it and the way they collaborate and give back, all of these issues that I've talked about, I didn't talk about homelessness, another thing that we're working on every one of those issues, I can tell you government is not going to solve those issues alone. It's every board in this state. We have people from the private sector, people from the chambers who are working with us, who are bringing their best ideas, who are donating and giving back. And that is the secret of Utah. It's not because we have the best governor in the country or the best legislature in the country. It's because we have the best people, the best businesses, people who care about this place and want to leave it better than they found it. And I just feel so fortunate to be able to represent them. And I hope I get the opportunity to represent all of you for 4 more years.
Thank you, Governor Cox. Thank you for your time this afternoon. We appreciate your leadership of the state and appreciate what you do for our business community. Thank you for spending time with the Salt Lake Chamber and our members. We wish you the best of luck in your campaign.
Thank you, Derek.
We also want to thank all of you who have joined us. We're grateful for your time. We want to invite you to join us for the next candidate forum. You can find that information on slchamber.com on upcoming events. Thank you.